So we're going to do just a quick primer on HTML and CSS, kind of on top of what you already learned the basics, but how this applies to changing the look and feel of your theme using the CSS customizer element that's in the Jetpack plugin. So first, you need the Jetpack plugin, which is here. And as one of the features of the Jetpack plugin, it gives you a customizable CMS, custom CSS. You have to make sure this is on. If it is on, you will find it under the Appearance Edit CSS. And it's very important that you edit the CSS here instead of somewhere else, because that is the spot where if you update the theme and update the core, it won't wipe out all your changes. If you modify the actual CSS of the theme and you update the theme, it's gonna write over all your changes when it updates the theme. So you have to make sure you put it in this custom CSS. And do note this custom CSS is per theme. So if you change your theme, if you do all this customization and then you change your theme, it's also gonna get wiped out. I like to copy and paste this into a text file or a Google Doc and save it every day or two that I'm working on it, just in case I won't need to go back or I accidentally change the theme and I lose all my work. So make sure you back up your custom CSS. And you can simply select all, copy paste it into a Word doc or a text file, or even email it to yourself so that you have it. Okay, so this is where we're going to use what I'm going to tell you about right today. So websites are built from HTML. We know that, right? HTML was originally made to give meaning to the text that's in web pages. They have, over the last 10 to 15 years, they have changed it over and over again to make it more specific and more helpful. CSS was kind of designed by mistake to help us better control the look and feel of our website. So it used to be that when you wrote an HTML page, you would write the look and feel and the content were directly interwoven. So you would have a line like, you'd have a paragraph tag, and then you would have the color directly in the tag. And so if you ever wanted to change the color of a paragraph, you had to do it per paragraph. The power of CSS is that you separate the HTML and the CSS into two separate files, so that a page with no CSS, and we've seen these using the inspector. No, it's not. There's a plugin where we can remove the CSS, and you'll see the HTML page is blank. It's just black and white. It uses the browser settings. So adding CSS to the document allows us to change the look and feel and the layout of that content. So that, and this changed everything, because now the content of a web page and the look and feel of the web page are separate. So if you have a really old device, or you want to print something, you can strip all the colors and all the images out of it and just print the text. So this is kind of a big deal in web design. It happened about 7 years ago. And they both, so there are two files. You have the content and the design, right? And they both have languages like Spanish or French, and you write things a certain way. So HTML always uses the brackets, and CSS uses curly brackets. We call these carets sometimes with a greater than, less than, and then CSS, so CSS, HTML, and they stand for a cascading style sheet and hypertext markup language. Just for trivial pursuit. So we've got the curly brackets with the scroll quotes and the carets for the greater than, less than. And they have a few things in common. So all HTML tags, all CSS tags open and close. If they don't open and close, you'll get an error. And the severity of the error will depend on whatever it is. HTML talks all about what the content is. So we have HTML tags like the body, the the document type, the paragraph. We also have new ones called like section, article. I think we have a navigation, I think, or menu. And these came out in, I think, HTML5, which is right around when I stopped writing HTML, so forgive me if that's a little rusty. These are all, they expanded the number of tags in HTML, in HTML5, so that we could talk more semantically about the content within our tags. Before, every time we wanted to add CSS to something, we'd have to create just a generic div, which is just a division, and then give it a class name so that we could talk to it. And now we have more specific items.
So is the div still used?
The div is still used. If you don't have a good HTML title, then you can always use div.
And how is the div used?
The way that these two relate is that you have a tag, so like body, which is like the biggest one, right? So if you want to set everything as a default, the HTML tag body can be called in CSS by saying body. So CSS has reserved words that directly relate to the HTML sections. So there's body, there's P, there's section, article, navigation, A for link, A. And those are words those are preset. These are super strong. These are like the most powerful CSS selectors that we have. And they select a part of the page so that you can style it. So you're basically, it's kind of like a phone number, like you're calling them directly and telling them to look differently. So that's how these two correlate. And these, you call the CSS in your HTML file. So that's how they're tied together intrinsically. Once you define a selector, you can have a property and a variable. So the body, so those is just how do you want it to look, right? So we might say background, color, and then you can still use regular colors. So you could say red, or you could say gray, use the hex code, CCC, and each command has to end with a semicolon. It's just the syntax of how they decided it's going to be written. And you can add more. So I could have font, family. So the semicolon divides so you have selector, let me get the word right, property and variable. Make sure I'm telling you the right word. So properties reference. There you go. So here's all your properties. So once you decide what you're talking about, these are all the things you can change. So you've got borders, you've got backgrounds, you can change font families, you can change anything that has a property you can touch. And there are many, many, many. So here's just two. We change the background color to gray. And then with this semicolon, we say we're going to change something else. So we're going to change the font family to Arial, and we always include a list of fonts because not all computers have the same sets of fonts. Nowadays, everyone pretty much has a set like 10, but if you were going to use a Google font, you might say Railway, and then Arial is a backup, and then as a further backup, you can say serif or sans serif. This is sans serif. And then you close that command with the semicolon. If you're done, then you close it with the curly bracket.
Why does Railway have quotation marks?
Because Rail is a Google font. Because it's a web font. So I'll remind me in a second. I'll get back to that. So you can do this with any HTML property. The part where this gets complicated So this is pretty basic, right? You find something in your HTML page, you write CSS, that changes the look and feel of it. You have a list of properties you can choose from. Use the inspector to highlight what it is you want to look at. And then you can play with the colors, the margin, the padding. I would be careful changing margins and paddings because in responsive, that might override the built-in, how that natively works, and it might mess things up. Colors, fonts, those are fair game. Changing the size of like headers, so another one, the headline of every page is the H1. So if we wanted to change those, we would go over here and create a new selector, create a new rule, like color. If you wanted to change the headers on your theme, you might say color QC218F, which is my hot pink. That's why I know that one. And then that's all I want to do. So I make my closing curly bracket, and that's it. And then you just create a list. This can be super long. Often these are pages and pages.
So did you say that it's safe to change text sizes or not so safe?
You can, it depends on the theme. It depends on how, if they use like gold ratio with their line heights and their, try it. That's what the inspector is great for, because you can try it in the inspector, see how it looks. And then if you like it, you can copy it and paste it into your theme. So I'll do that next.
How do you know if you're using gold ratio?
That's where you would try it and see if it messed everything up, basically. Often if you were gonna go into like a sidebar and add 5 M's of padding, you're gonna see the whole site just get messed up. So the easiest ones to do are fonts and colors. And that's probably what all of it hopefully will be.
Then it's about changing like the H1, now it's kind of universal. You're changing it for the whole site, so that's one of the things you have to kind of be careful.
These are ultra powerful. So if you're changing H1s, you're changing all the H1s on all the HTML pages in your entire site. Same with the body, that's everything. What you can do if you don't want, so these are the HTML tags. If you want to be more specific in what you're changing, you can target something individually. So like, let's do this footer. So if I inspect this footer element, so the way that you can tell if you're looking at the right thing is that it highlights. So I'm looking at that. There's a div. So, oh, there's a footer. Is that what I want? See, it highlights the whole thing. So that HTML tag footer, I can use that, and that's going to change the whole footer. If I wanted to change just a specific part of the footer, like the site info, then I can get more specific. So when it only has a div here, would I want to create a rule for that div? If I want to change it to a white footer? If I want to update the color of this bar down here, see how it's a black bar? If I want to make that whole bar black, would I choose this one? This div, the HTML div? If I did, it's going to change all the backgrounds of all the divs to white. So that's when you need to get more specific. And that's where the classes come in. So see this right here, this class site info, that's a way to create a specific element in a web page that you can then talk to in style. So if I had, use the footer example, say I wanted to change, so I don't want the whole footer, I just want the site info, I wouldn't use footer because that's going to get everything. I would just use the class site info. So class refers to the CSS, and that's a particular, that's written this way with a dot. And it's something you invent. These are words you can call it flirtation. You can call it anything you want. Probably don't want to do that. You want to call it something that describes what it is you're talking about. So this is called site info. If I call it, I'm calling its name, then I can change its properties. So color, white. So this is called a class. And there's two different kinds of these. There's a class and a ID, thank you. And they're just written differently. IDs, there used to be kind of no difference, and you could use either one. But now we generally reserve IDs, so you could also have, this would be terribly confusing, but you could have a class and ID called site info. Usually the IDs are used for programming elements or like JavaScript. So you generally won't use these. You're gonna stick to classes.
And a class is a period.
The class is a period, and the pound sign is the ID. And we've kind of created standards where we use the ID for like loading JavaScript and doing more programmer-y type things. Also, you might see the ID used for layout, like boxes of things. But generally, you're only going to use class. There's a third way to use CSS, which is called inline, which is where you write it directly in the HTML. This is kind of one of those, nothing else is working, I have to do this. You probably won't be doing it at all unless you're in your blog post and you want to like do this random one-off thing where maybe you are writing a blog post and there's a paragraph that you want to have a hot paint background to. Just this one time for this one crazy event, and then you would write it in line. So it would be P style equals color pink. And it's directly in line. So this is the strongest possible way to write CSS. If I wrote it over here in my CSS and wrote the P should be red, this is going to lose the battle. This one's going to win every time because it's closer to the actual text. So it's all based on the power of the elements is based on location. So this is the attached file. You can write it in line. You can also write it in the header of your document.
Yeah, so I just, that's why when you helped me, I picked those two, the header and the footer bars, and then I put it in the CSS. Then I went back to the CSS and tried to change the color, but it didn't change it. And that's because I programmed it in the other side. Is that why?
Did you edit what we already put in there? It should change. Did you refresh?
Oh,
Yeah. So another little thing. Every time you write the CSS in that custom CSS thing, you have to make sure you hit the save, and then you have to go to your web page and refresh because essentially you've changed the code of the document, and you have to pull it into the browser again so you see your changes. Make sure you do that.
okay, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's odd that they use class to be more specific since that we're usually use a group of things or an overview. Is there any reason for that? It's just what it is. You're saying it means just pinpoint that one thing.
Yeah. I don't know why they call it class. It just is. There's a lot of threes in HTML and CSS. There are 3 ways to attach a CSS to HTML. There's inline, in the head of the document, and as an attached document. CSS has 3 parts. You have the selector, the property, and the variable. You even have like 3 syntax. You have the curlies, the semicolon that separates these two, and then the semicolon that ends it. CSS, 3s in CSS. Yeah, that's kind of the basics of it. If you ever need to know a particular CSS reference, the W3 schools is like the best, most up-to-date reference I've ever found. Because it gives you all these great property groups. You can get really, really, in HTML5, we got a lot more capability. We used to be very limited by HTML and CSS. And now there's things like, because we're also on the 3rd version of CSS. So you can do gradients, animations, opacity. There's some really cool stuff you can do now. So let me see if I can show you one. They're not all supported on all browsers. CSS3. There's a lot of generators where you can build. The border radius was a big thing. Do you remember when all the box borders were rounded? That used to be a very, very labor-intensive thing. So this generator is kind of nice. It will give you all of the, it'll build the CSS for you. Let me see. The text shadow is a cool one. Was it going to give me a show? One, back. Oh, there we go. So see that? Do you see the drop shadow there? If I change the settings. So if you wanted to use a drop shadow, that's better, easier to read. So you can do that, and then you can copy this. So there's the code for you, and you just put it on the right class that you wanted to add that to. This is a handy generator. It'll give you all those. Transform is cool. You can have, on hover, you can have things move or fold or transform. Don't get seduced by this. It can get really crazy. The ones you'll probably use this for would be opacity. So RGBA, the red, green, blue is the colors of the lights that's coming through your screen to show you what you're seeing on your computer. So to get a color in RGB, there's hex to RGB translators. So if you wanted to use an opaque overlay on an image, like when you hovered, this is how you could get that number. So if I wanted, I don't know what color this is. And the opacity goes from 0 to 1. So there's a gray. And you can see if I go 0.3, it's much lighter. If I go 0.9, it's nearly opaque. And that gives you a background color that is a color, but an opacity as well. So it's kind of a new thing we've been given. Once I show you all these, like, it's hard not to want to, like, oh, I could do that and this and that and other. So if you really want to play with this, I recommend just getting a, just using straight HTML and CSS in a browser and just playing with it that way and seeing what you like. Because there are tons and tons of options. So the last thing I want to tell you, before I let you work again, is how, so a lot of you are going to want to change your font, right? Google Fonts, there's kind of two games in town. There's Typekit by Adobe and Google Fonts. Google Fonts are free. Typekit, you sometimes have to pay. Both are limited to their library of fonts. When you want to use a special font, a web font, so there's two different kinds of fonts. There's web fonts that are hosted by Google. So these fonts live on Google servers. And when you load your page, it pings the Google server and pulls that font down into your site. If you're just using a regular font, those are the ones you see on your computer every day. So Arial, Comic Sans, Trebuchet, Helvetica if you're on a Mac. PCs don't have Helvetica or Helvetia. There are fonts built into your computer. Almost every computer that's still functioning has like 10 fonts built in. When you're styling your page, fonts, we list fonts at least 3 in a list separated by commas so that if the computer doesn't have the first font, it defaults to something else. And if they still don't have that, it defaults to sans serif or serif. And we know that hopefully in your design classes, serif means tail. So it's fonts with tails, sans serif is like not. Do y'all, everybody know what I'm talking about? Mostly not. Okay, good. So when you want to choose a Google font, I used Railway, my example. So you can bring it up here. You can, Google Fonts is pretty awesome. You can find pairings and statistics. So if you have trouble pairing fonts, actually this is the combo I'm using, Railway and Lato. I like Lato for body font, body text. You can look at them. Remember Jennifer was saying make sure you try these in different browsers because sometimes they'll look good in Chrome and not in Firefox. It's a good thing to remember to try before you select a branded font. You hit add to collection. You do not want to use too many fonts. So it'll give you this little page load thing. Every time you load a font, your website has to ping the Google servers for that font and has to do that extra talkie to bring your fonts down. So if you're loading 6 fonts, it's going to slow your page down significantly.
So when you add these fonts, do you add them directly to your WordPress site, or? So
there are a couple ways to add your fonts. We have to do 2 things. You have to connect your web page with the Google font, the right font on the Google server. So that's an @ import. Then you have to say where in your page you want to use that font. So I'll show you that. So there's 2 steps to using a Google font. The hard part is that they changed the way you have to call your font. So I don't think you can do it just in your CSS. We can try it. Let's try it just for fun. So when you go to Google Fonts, it'll tell you kind of choose which variables you want. So if you're going to use, I'm going to use the normal, and I might want to italicize. And I'm going to use the bold, and I might want to italicize that. So I'm going to grab those 4 variants. And it's telling me, whoa, that's a big page load. Be careful. Yes, noted. Thank you, Google. So the standard, this is HTML. You can see because it has the carets. Normally, you would add these into your HTML page. Since we're using WordPress, it gets a little trickier for us. The import is better. So to embed your collection, copy the code and put it in the head of your HTML document. So yeah, getting into the HTML head of your theme is tricky. There are 2 ways you can do it. You can use a plugin that is specifically going to inject this code into the head of your theme, or you can create a child theme and inject it yourself. You want to see both of them?
We don't know.
Whichever's easier. Okay. So let's go back to my test blog. And let's do the plugin one, I think is going to be the easiest one. So I'm going to try that first. So I'm going to add new. Add new. I usually do a child theme and put it in the head. I'll show you that next. And I do that because I'm usually making more customizations to the theme than just the font. If you're only doing the font and you know that's kind of the only really, besides just changing some colors, then I would do this way with the Google font. So we're going to look for a plugin that all this plugin is going to do is let us add a Google font. So easy Google Fonts. This has 200,000 installs, 160 reviews. That's pretty good. Just look at a couple more. 2 months ago. That's okay. I'm going to install that one. That sounds okay to me. Activate. And I'm going to try the settings. So I'm going to look here, see how it wants me to do it. Edit font controls. So let's do, I'm just going to call this headers. Create font control. I haven't used this plugin before, so I'm just seeing what. Oh, cool, it'll do everything for you. So here you can type in the CSS selector that you'd like this font to control. So I could do, this is instead of writing HTML. So I can do like H1, H2, H3. If I want all my headers to be this font, oops. We'll just start with that. And we're going to override our style sheet. We'll save that. And manage font controls. Oh, API key, huh? Okay, well. Look. What is this doing? So it said to go to the customizer. Let's see. Oh, your theme will update the latest Google fonts automatically. Okay, so it's gonna give me a list. Oh, cool. Okay, so this gave me a list of all the fonts on all the fonts on Google. So instead of just importing the one I want to use, it's using the API key to connect to Google Fonts and giving me the option through the customizer to use any font I want. So it's kind of cool. It's a good way to do it.
API, did you have to type something?
I'm gonna Google that right now. It's Google Fonts API key. An API is it's kind of like open sourcing data. It'll let you interact with like Twitter or Google Fonts and pull things from their service. It allows programs to talk to each other.
Are you getting to the point where it has to pull it every time, or is it actually installed and embedded in your site?
I think that every page it has to pull it because it's in the head of every page, and every time you go to a different page, it's going to reload. So it's not going to.
It's not going to live in your.
It might leave a cookie. It might download the font in a cookie so that it speeds up the browsing.
Is this a cloud thing?
Yes, these fonts are living in the cloud on Google servers. So when your site loads in the head, so it loads top to bottom. In the head, it's doing all, it's like loading JavaScript, it's loading your style sheet, it's contacting Google to get the font, and then it's loading the page. So yes, this is a cloud, these are cloud fonts. Getting the API key is kind of annoying. Okay, well, we'll do it. So here's how to obtain it. So let's do this. A lot of services, so Google Fonts, Twitter, Facebook, a lot of those are going to ask for API keys. If you Google it, it's pretty easy to find them. So I'm already logged in. This is my developer console. It looks like I've needed this kind of thing before. Let me go back to the instructions. Create a new project. Click APIs under the APIs and Auth menu. So Google Fonts API key. Create. And you would do this like for clients, probably. Let's see. Now what? Click APIs under the API and Auth menu. Anybody see it? App Engine documentation. Use Google APIs. Do you want that? Ooh, okay. They have 100+ APIs. Google Fonts Developer, that's what we want. Using an API key. Enable. So there's a good little graphic. Your website uses this key to access this service, basically. It's enabled, but you can't use it until you create credentials. Do this now, okay? I want that one. Determine where will you be calling the API from? A web browser. So this is like if you're using Android would be if you're doing an Android app, iOS for an iOS app, Chrome application would be like a Chrome plugin, PlayStation. So we're just using a web browser. We're calling it via JavaScript. There we go. Browser key 1. Yay! There's my key! Copy. Done. Why does it have a... Let me try this. It has that little... I'm going to go back to those settings and paste that key in. Here we go. Paste. Save. Yay! Yay! So now when I go back to my customizer, and again, this is just how this plugin works. I've had other ones where you just use the @import and you paste that in. So this is kind of cool in that it's giving you like all the fonts. Could be cool, could be not cool. So I can go in here and choose anything. This might not be good for a lot of clients because you don't want them to go kind of crazy. But there. So you see it changing in the preview there? So Roboto, I like Lato. So it's changing that font. And then you can do the weight. It's kind of giving you everything. So the heading 1. So this is giving me all the capabilities inside the customizer. So that's kind of cool. And it's letting me choose railway. And I can set it to bold and save. So that's one way to add the Google Fonts. Okay. Let me see. I'm going to go back to plugins and I'm going to deactivate this one and see settings, deactivate, which is going to kill, if I turn that off, my blog's not going to have that font anymore. See the top? Because I deactivated what was making it happen.
If you activate it again, does everything stay set up?
I wouldn't bank on that. Sometimes if things with, some customizers have an export that you can then import. So if you turn off that theme, you can import your settings back in. Some of those like Virtue, I think has that. Some themes have that. So let's add new. Let's add, I'm gonna say import Google font and try that. Let's see if there's a simpler one. Google Font Manager, options. Discontinued. Google Font Manager. Yeah, that's a bit more than I want. Let me try, let's do the child theme one. So I'll show you the other way. And this, creating a child theme, so for security reasons, they changed the way that you create child themes. Writing it by hand is really complicated and I could not figure it out. So kudos to you if you try to do it that way. It used to be pretty easy. You would go into the template and kind of do a little copy paste some code and be good. I now use this plugin because it's a little easier. It's this one by the Lilea Media. So child theme configurator. I like it. It works pretty well. So I'm going to install that and it creates a child theme of your theme. So the way the child theme works is, maybe there's a nice graphic. A child theme takes all of the settings of the parent theme but then you can overwrite anything you want. So like a good metaphor is my daughter, Novella, is the child of my husband and I. And she comes with our genetics, right? If she were to create a child theme for herself, she could dye her hair and make it red. So she comes built with what we gave her, but if she wants to overwrite certain elements like, you know, dyeing her hair, wearing color contacts, painting her nails, those kinds of things, that's the child theme. So she still retains everything she got from her parents, but she's overriding certain elements. That's exactly what a child theme is. Of course, she's never going to do any of that stuff, right? Yeah. Let's see. So, child theme, deactivate, edit. Where is my? There we go. So under tools, it's always tricky. You never know where they're going to add the settings for their plugins. In this case, under tools, you see a new element called child themes, and that's where you can set up the settings for this. My parent theme is listed here. I'm going to create a new kind of best practice. You take the parent theme and you add -child to it to signify that it's a child theme. This is handy because a child theme without knowing who the parent is kind of useless. Style sheet handling, we're just going to leave this the way it is. And generate the child theme. So this plugin does all that work for you, which is nice. And now it's switched us to Athena Child, which is our new theme. And web fonts, here we go. So this lets you import your web fonts easily. So I created a child theme based on, so make sure you've chosen your theme. Before you create a child theme, you are committing to a theme. Otherwise, you're doing work for nothing. If you change your theme after modifying it, then you lose everything. So I created the child theme. It says use existing child theme. I've got my Athena Child. It's got a web fonts tab where I can import that Google font. So I chose Railway, add to the collection. I want to use it. I'm going to grab italic, bold italic. Those are the ones I want. I'm going to use the @import method. This gets into, these are just different ways that your website is calling down the theme from the cloud. They're different ways. The @import is kind of the new standard. It's going to change again, whatever, they change all the time. This is what my child theme configurator is asking me for. So, and you can see here it gives you some instructions. And here's exactly the kind of one we're looking at. So this is saying when my page loads, import a style sheet, import these fonts from this URL. So go to this URL, fonts.googleapis.com, and grab the Railway font in these types. So the 400 is the font weight. 400 italic, 700 is bold, 700 italic is bold, italic. Save. And now when I go to my, so you could, now you have 2 child CSS documents. I like to just stick, to avoid confusion, I like to just stick with my Jetpack CSS because I know I'm always going to use Jetpack, and I like to put them all in one place. You can put them in either place, doesn't matter. They're still getting called. So this is where now, so now I've got the font connected. My website is connected to the cloud, grabbing that Railway font. Now I can go H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6. I can grab them all separated with commas. And I can do font.
At this point, are you in the child theme or are you in the parent theme when you're in this mode?
Technically, kind of neither. I'm in my custom CSS, so it's kind of a child theme. The only reason I had to create a child theme for this was to import the fonts, because you have to do that in HTML. So I'm using the Jetpack custom CSS, which I recommend using for all your custom CSS. Your theme might already allow for you to choose from different fonts. So you might not have to import fonts. If you have to import fonts, you can use that plugin I just showed you that lets you change the fonts in the customizer, which might be good if you're not sure what font you want to use and you want to keep kind of playing with them and you want that easy user interface. It really depends on if you want to learn CSS and practice it, then I would do it this way, because this is going to force you to write CSS. But that other way gives you the drop downs and you don't have to write CSS. It just depends on where you want to use your brain.
So you're saying it's better to do that than to use the child theme plugin? Like, I'm a little confused. So if you have the child theme plugin and you go to those, ways that you change it, like, I don't follow exactly.
So the problem we're solving is we want to change the font and we want to use a Google font. I'm going over 2 different ways to do that. So the first way I showed you was using that Google font plugin, and that simply added the fonts and let you select them in the customizer. That's one way, period. So put that aside. This way is a different way to do it that's a bit more hands-on. So you can do it this way. If you want to do it this way, you create a child theme and then you edit the CSS. But you have to create the child theme to connect your website with the font cloud.
That's the only reason you created child theme.
For this case, yes. Now that I have the child theme created though, if I wanted to change more of the site, I have that capability. So like if you know you're gonna change a lot of things, you could even like change the featured image size and you're changing thumbnail sizes. Maybe you're creating new templates, then you need the child theme anyway. So it really depends. You kind of need to know where you're headed at the very beginning. If all you want to change is the fonts, I would use the font plugin. If you know that you want to make changes to the templates and deeper, more in-depth changes where you may be changing code, then you need a child theme. So it really just depends on your comfort level and where you're going. So I'm going to change the font family, and you can copy this, which is really nice. Down here, it gives you the syntax. I'm horrible at syntax, so I always try and copy things. So font family. So this is saying the font family for all the headings should be Railway or sans serif. And then make sure that you've closed your line with a semicolon and you closed your command with the curly bracket, save. And let's go check it out. So some of them, I can't even tell. Is that Railway? No, it's Lotto. So here's what I just wrote right here. There's my code, but it's being overwritten by something in the theme. So let me go back to the customizer and see. I think that's because my customizer has, does it have themes, appearance, fonts? Yeah. So my theme already had fonts in it, which is why my new ones aren't working. So I wouldn't have needed to do this, but if you have a theme that does not have fonts included, then that would work for you. But I can change this easily, Railway and Lotto. So mine had it built in. But if I change the font, I have to change the child theme. But does that kind of show you? So that's how you grab Google Fonts, 2 ways to plug them in. And then just kind of a basic primer on CSS and
Another
HTML.
question, you had the quotation marks when you were designating it. So if you have to know if it's a Google font that you're designating and if it is a Google font and you use quotation marks, that's just.
Yeah, I think that's because, I don't know why you need, because sometimes it's single quotes and sometimes it's double quotes. So I'm not really sure why that is. We could look it up. Why fonts in CSS have quotes. So to avoid mistakes in escaping, it's recommended to quote font family names that contain spaces and digits. So it's just the way that the computer reads the, because some fonts will be multiple words and a computer gets confused by that. So
all fonts have the quotes.
to be safe, yeah. The escaping is like a programming term where if you're doing a process, you escape, you kind of clear out the memory so that it doesn't hinder the next process.
Would you put quotes on sans serifs when you're?
I never have. I generally use whatever Google provides because that's their computers. They should know how they want to talk to.
Can you tell us about just a little bit more about fonts? Because I've been, a little confused about licensed fonts, and like
Sure.
Adobe fonts, and like what do we need to know about other fonts other than Google fonts?
So, hold on. There are native fonts. We used to only have like 10 or 12 fonts to choose from, and those were the fonts that came standard on every computer. The more fonts you download on the computer, the more space it takes, the more RAM it takes. But all computers have like the Times New Roman, Arial, like 10 that are common on all computers. Those are the safest ones to pull in a website because the website is using whatever fonts are on the user's machine. Recently, in the last 5 or 6 years, web fonts were created. Those are fonts hosted by Google and Typekit that live in the cloud, and they basically install the fonts on their servers and dole them out to whoever asks for them. And they're providing that free as a service. So they're licensing the fonts from the artists who created them and giving them out for free.
Typekit and Google?
Google Fonts is free. Typekit is an Adobe product. In general, their fonts are going to be slightly higher quality and more branded. So you're going to get more like unique and interesting. It has a general rule. I mean, this is fuzzy. Because Typekit fonts are more designerly. They're more for like the higher end. So like Coca-Cola will have a specific font that they want to use. Or, just larger brands have very specific fonts that they have to use. And usually you have to pay for those.
Are they safer across platforms?
Theoretically, because of the cost, they've been tested more, and you might have more like fancy stuff in them, like ligatures and icons. It's kind of like, when you pay for something, it's going to be a little bit better than the free. Although Google free fonts, I constantly use them. They're pretty good. But you get some where like they won't have like numbers, or they won't have certain punctuation marks, or they don't do a ligature with like an F and an L, and so it looks kind of crappy. So if the look and feel is going to be really important to your client, you might want to look into these, the Typekit fonts. Typekit fonts are their pricing is based on traffic usually. So if you have a site that's getting, I think Stack Library is using a Typekit font. Let me show you that. Because their branded font, I think, is Futura. So this font we were pleasantly surprised at how, so Futura PT. And the pricing is based on how many times users' computers grab that font from the Typekit server. So theirs was like, it wasn't that bad. It was like $35 a month per font variation. So they have, this is Futura PT in uppercase transform. And then I think the bold one is a different, because the bold is a different type. So I think they had to pay for that one separately. And it was based on the number of users they get per month or per year. So say they get 35,000 hits to their page a month, then that's like a tier where you pay for that Google font. So I want to say it was cheap. It was $70 a month or a year. So it was affordable for them. But for most small businesses, they probably wouldn't want to incur that extra cost, right?
No, I just want to point out, I guess at that point, you do have to disclose that to the client, that you've developed the site, and here's one, you know, you want these nice fancy fonts or whatever, you're gonna pay more for them on an annual basis. So they have to factor in the volume that they should anticipate.
Yes. But there's like a tier of client that would want that. You know, usually I don't include that unless it's someone like the library or like someone that has a specific brand to their look and feel where you can't find a similar font. Because there's a lot of cases where you can find a Google font that's really close and your client's not going to notice, and it's free and they don't want to pay more. But in this case, they wanted to keep it on brand.
So how do you get it into the WordPress?
Very similar. It's almost the same. They have an import and then you use it in CSS. It's the same technology. It's just a different source.
And then do they, like, so when you buy it, like, you would have to get the key for
Typekit. Yeah.
And then do they tell you how the pricing will be? Like,
Yes.
And then they give you the rules or something when you download it, how it would work? And
Yeah, last time I did it, you say, I want to purchase this font. Some of them are free. I don't know my password for Adobe right now, but you choose your font, you look at the level, the tier that you need, you sign up for the pricing, and then they give you the link to the font. And once you have that connection, so that HTML at import the font, remember that part? Once you have that connection, then using your style sheet, you say where in your page you'd like to use that font.
so you would buy it through your client's website so that they own that fee?
I would have my client buy it just because that might be on like an auto update and then it's got your credit card, and what if they disappear? You're paying for their font. Yeah. So I would generally go through it as if I was going to buy it, take screenshots, use my annotating awesome screenshot plugin, and like big red box. This is what you're buying. This is the level. Here's where you put your credit card in, and then forward me the email they send you and I'll connect it. Give me your username and password for your account and I'll connect it. So that's usually what I do when buying plugins, fonts, themes, anything like that.
So at what point do you create a style guide for your clients also? With money wise, like how much does a site have to cost before you produce a style guide? Or should everyone automatically have one? Because when you start getting into your pricey fonts and that cost,
Yeah.
I think it would be imperative to be provided with one.
It really depends on the client. So I have a client right now where I'm creating a logo for them. I'm updating their logo. I will probably do just a page on how to use your logo. Here's the versions, here's the fonts, here's where to download them. Like 1 or 2 pages, because that site it's around the $5,000 level. When you get to sites that are $10,000 to $60,000, usually the company has a brand, and a style guide that you are pulling from. Sometimes you're doing both. Sometimes you are creating the style guide and then the website follows the style guide you wrote. So that's a possibility. Generally, that is a separate project. I mean, we might be proposing at the same time. So say it's a new company and they need a new website and they need a new brand. So we would like write the proposal for everything and then break out the pricing. So here's the branding project, and here's the discovery, here's the revisions, here's the logo, here's the sketches and like everything that goes there. And then we take it and we do the website because you have to do branding first. But then as you're doing the branding, you know it needs to translate to web, so you would choose fonts that had a web complement. But usually branding and style guides is a separate project from the web. I haven't often. I've done style sheets, style tiles, where you take their branding and kind of translate it into web speak. So this is a really good example where they took, so the examiner has existing branding. Here's how it might translate in a website. And this is a really simple, there's even like a builder of this now. But here's how we can translate your brand into web. And this came out, I think I heard this talk at a conference in like 07, 8, somewhere like late in the 2010s. Blew my mind, so excited. Because before, like we were just kind of figuring it out. Like you have this brand and we're building this website and here's how we think it's gonna translate. And when this, it seems so simple, like so duh, but wow. I was super excited about style tiles. So then I would incorporate these into because it's a really good halfway point if you're working with a committee, you have to get approvals before you build a homepage, you wanna say, is this the right direction? You know, so these are cool, Style sheet for you. So style.me?
Stylify me.
Stylify. Style. So here's a generator that'll pull it from your, let's try this one. You put in a website and it'll build a style tile. So awesome. So you could add a style tile for low budget clients and whip it out real quick.
What is that website?
Stylify me.
Oh, that's fine.
And it pulls out, these are all the icons, the images you're using. Here's all the colors. So this is really great for a redesign if they want to stick with the same branding and just freshen things up. So that pulls all the colors. And you can download it, or you could just, I would just take, well, I would probably put it in a Illustrator and grab what's necessary. But pretty cool. Okay, ready to work a little bit more?